Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to our monthly research seminar. It's good to have you with us. Look, for those of you that I haven't met before, my name is Dave Lamb. I'm the Chief Scientist of Food Agility, and I'll be your MC for this seminar. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional owners of the many lands and waters on which we all live and work. I'd like to pay respects to the elders of all of these lands and waters, both past and present and emerging. For those of you unfamiliar with us, Food Agility is a CRC dedicated to unlocking the power of digital and data to transform our agri-food sector. Now, before I introduce our speaker, just a couple of little pieces of housekeeping. We are recording this session and ultimately we'll make the recording available to you. We certainly welcome questions, and please use a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Not the chat tab, I'll keep an eye on the chat tab, but the Q&A tab is the way to pose any questions. It's not possible of you to actually ask the questions direct of our presenter, but at the end of the seminar, I'll work through the questions and retail them, and we can have a conversation around them. If you have a burning desire to follow up anything you've heard directly with the presenter, of course, our presenter is part of our team and the contact details will be provided in the slides. So now to the seminar topic. On Farm Experimentation, or OFE, is exactly what it says and more. At its heart is restructuring farmer-researcher relationships and along the way addressing the complexities and uncertainties through joint exploration. It's about approaches to agricultural research and innovation that are embedded in real-world farm management. So on-farm experimentation reflects a growing demand for decentralized and inclusive research that bridges the sources of knowledge and fosters open innovation. And that's really the heart of our CRC. Our very own on-farm experimentation project has been running now for the past 4 years and is hosted by our partner, Curtin University. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you today's speaker, Dr. Julia Easton from Curtin University. In addition to being a long-serving and very valued member of the Food Agility CRC team, Julia now leads the Curtin for Agribusiness Profitability Initiative, C4AP. It's a multidisciplinary team developing the next generation of agribusiness research capability through the combination of data analytics, sensing technologies for spatial and temporal variability in crop production, and the work also feeds into developing tools for agribusiness decision-making and financial products. Julia's passion for the translation of research outcomes into transformational practice change and increasing agribusiness profitability, such as through the initiative she leads, is embedded in everything Julia does. So it's no surprise that Julia has effectively led our on-farm experimentation project for pretty well most of its life. So it's a privilege to have you with us today, Julia, and we look forward to hearing more about how on-farm experimentation bridges that utility gap in industry-derived field experiments. Welcome.
Thanks, Dave. That's a great introduction. I'm just going to get this going. Come on, there we go. Is that working? All right. So as Dave said, I'm here to talk about on-farm experimentation and particularly bridging that utility gap in industry-derived field experiments. It's been a huge team and I'm going to talk to that in a minute. The On-Farm Experimentation Project is the first project developed as part of the WA node of Food Agility Cooperative Research Centre, and it wouldn't be possible without the co-investment from Food Agility, Curtin University and the state government through JITSI and DPIRD, as well as our relationship with NGIS Australia. And also without the Science and Agribusiness Connect program, particularly the Premier's Agriculture and Food Fellowship, which has funded the Premier's Fellow and Premier's Mid-Career Fellow in Agriculture and Food. Now, I want to start by acknowledging the contributions of a really wide range of people and organisations. Without their commitment to the project and the vision for the grains industry, we wouldn't have been able to achieve this together. And I'm really grateful for everyone's contribution to date. Come on. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk through why paddock scale experiments are important and how they fit into the farming systems. The analytics approach that we've developed for robust analysis for paddock scale experiments, and to talk briefly about how we've progressed the research ontogeny through this collaboration. And we've tested this on 50 trials, over 50 trials in WA in collaboration with a number of grower groups and CSBP. I'm also going to talk through the process for on-farm experiments and how we've optimized a co-design approach and using a case study, which is Mick Coy's trial. And I have to put a huge thanks out to him and to Luke, because as you'll see over the next few slides, he features quite a lot. I'm going to talk to the on-farm experimentation tool that NGIS Australia has developed in collaboration with us, and step you through some videos on that. And then also talk about what's next for our next generation agribusiness analytics initiative. So why do we do on-farm experiments? Grain growers are always experimenting through trials. They do trials on their farms that lead to utility and trust in the results. They access their own data and experience. They use their own equipment on their own farm and at a scale that they're used to. The high utility of these results make them incredibly meaningful for them. And we estimate that they spend at least 2 weeks per year on these trials, which is, 110 work hours per annum for WA. But even though these experiments are set up, measurement at the end often never happens, and you'll hear from Mick in a minute. Effectiveness is measured by eye or how it looks using images, and spatial variability confounds treatment effects, making it difficult to interpret their response. So Mick would really like to be able to analyse the results from trials he does on his farm and use this information to make decisions across the farm enterprise. There's industry-wide benefits from on-farm trials. And the two main types of trials that we have are the small plot trials that are commonly used, have maximum treatment effects and interactions. They minimise the spatial and environmental variation and variability. They're often initiated by external parties, are expensive to install and require specialist equipment. The data are also normally distributed, and the results are often difficult to translate to paddock scale. ANOVA is really suitable for this analytics approach to understand the treatment's effects. And these trials are absolutely critical for farming systems and agronomy work. But what we're finding is that when farmers scale up their data to paddock scale, as I said, the results don't always translate. So paddock scale and strip trials are often designed to address farmer-driven questions, use farm equipment, and are cost-effective. They have more utility for growers as the results are more relevant. But one of the downsides is that they encompass the spatial and environmental variability and different soil types, and the high variability can impact how a crop yield responds to treatments. ANOVA is not appropriate as an analytical approach for these paddock scale trials. And what ends up happening is that these trials are often not analysed as existing methods are not suitable or available for growers. So the on-farm experimentation project was set up to shift on-farm experiments from experience to experiment. And we've gone about developing a robust trial and analysis process with grain growers and helping them to make management decisions based on this data. So the underlying analysis process that we've used in this project is geographically weighted regression, or GWR. This is a spatial regression technique that was developed in 1996 for geography. And the key assumption here is the relationship between the treatment and the yield varies spatially. This approach estimates local linear regressions using a moving window approach, where y equals ax plus b, and data are weighted using a distance decayed kernel. The results of these regressions can be visualized as maps in terms of the intercept, which is a, and the slope, or the response, which is B. And it estimates the relationships of a dependent variable, for example, yield or NDVI, in relation to an explanatory variable, for example, the rate of fertilizer applied. And what GWR does is it allows us to understand how the crop response varies in a spatially variable environment and in a statistically robust way. So part of the project was modelling to test the theory that we had about the implementation of this for on-farm trials. This was published in 2020, and there's a large group of collaborators in there. This is over 500 simulations looking at spatially varying minimum yield, spatially varying responses to fertiliser, 4 rates, 0, 30, 60 and 100 kilograms per hectare, and a random complete block design strip trial with 2 reps, and strip widths of 3 meters and varying band widths. And more details of the R packages that Fiona's developed are available on her GitHub. Over the course of the project, we've been able to progress our research capability based on multiple years of trials on the same site, and also through this co-innovation approach. In the first year, we've demonstrated that using ANOVA really is not applicable for these paddock scale experiments. And so for the second year, we reanalyzed the same data using GWR and also applied that to the 2019 season. And we took lots of feedback on the visualization and how to make it more useful for the farmers and the agronomists that we were working with. We also dabbled with a spatial representation of the gross margin in terms of return on investment for fertiliser. And in the third year, we really developed the GWR analysis, and we've done a lot of work in the spatial representation of gross margin in terms of the return on investment for fertiliser. And we also did gross margins based on predicted yield. And all of that culminates with the risk and return on investment that Luke did from CSBP. And what I'm going to talk about today really focuses on this third year. We'll do a deep dive into this part because I've done an overview of the 3 years, which is already in the YouTube channel if you want to go and follow that up. So the process of OFE for our project was about optimizing this co-design approach. And the key to success of this project has been through co-innovation and co-design that we adopted as part of the project. Working with growers and their agronomists in a trusted dialogue with researchers has been critical to refining the process, analytics and data visualization. The process includes 3 main stages that we'll walk through in the following slides. The first is this grower-driven experimentation. This means engaging with growers before the grain growing season starts and working with them and their agronomists to plan and design experiments, and to make sure that it's simple and will answer the question that they're looking to answer. The second phase is in the data processing, analysis and reporting, and this mainly happens back in the university, and it involves collecting lots of data, so the trial layout data and how it was applied. The mid-season results, we collect NDVI, and the yield processing, and then the harvest report. And then the final phase is around the management change. So the key part to this is discussing the results with the grower and consultant together, because we all learn from each other as we do this process, and then to review and repeat the data. And it's really important to highlight that this racetrack concept was developed by Simon and Mathilde and has been published. So we've continued to improve that through our engagement with the project. I'm going to try and play this video, and I'm hoping it's going to work. Dave, just come on in my ear if you can't hear the video, hear the sound.
My name's Mick Coy. We're on our home farm here, 2,000 hectares. We crop 5,000 hectares annually. The trial paddock we're standing in here now is 175 hectares, and we have 3 different phosphorus rates in here, a very high one, a medium one and a average sort of one. I've got a lot out of the project. I've been variable rating for 4 years. and I've sort of learnt that I need inputs where I didn't think I needed them from some of the results we've got. Fiona's been really good in bringing that back to us. And engagement's been really good from CSBP and Curtin.
So you've had a trial on this paddock for 3 years?
Yep.
That's been analysed by the team?
Yeah, so it's third year of the project now. Obviously we haven't got this year's results yet, but 2 seasons, one fairly good season and one fairly poor season. This one's looking average or a bit better, so it'll be good to get an accumulation of those 3 years to really consolidate some decision making. It's really good to do trials, but to actually measure them and get some real outputs out of them so you can make some proper decisions, some proper financial decisions is very important. Lots of farmers, we're talking this morning as a group, lots of farmers do trials and they never get the results. They just look at them and that's about as far as they go. So it's very important to get the results out at the other end and to have people who, that's their love in life is statistics and stuff. It's great to put that back into our terms so we can understand it.
Have there been decisions you've been able to make because of the data that's come from the researchers? So
first year of the trial, the soil type I'm standing in here is generally normally unproductive, can hurt us a lot in a drier season, so we don't put many inputs on here as far as fertiliser goes. No phosphorus in the last few years, and the first year of the project we found that even as low as 4 units of P was getting a really good yield response and financial response or result. So the next year I changed my whole program on those soil types to lift the P rate, and it has made a difference for sure.
So the second phase in this is the planning and designing experiments. So what we've learnt from this is that having data sharing agreements that have a clear win-win value proposition are really important. Defining what we're each going to get out of sharing the data and the benefits is key to developing the trust and also to getting the most out of the projects. The benefits of these trusted partnerships between growers, agronomists and researchers is that we also sorry, that's one of the benefits. The trial design is critical, so making sure that it's simple, systematic and replicated, and alignment of the treatments with multiple header widths is key. Using farm management units is helpful, and these are the farm management units for mix paddock that we're going to walk through in a little while. And data handling and cleansing can be really time consuming, and if anybody's done any of this, they'll know exactly what we're talking about. So don't underestimate that part and learn from the people that have walked that walk already. And as ever, expect the unexpected. Trials using farm equipment often go in wrong, and so you need to be able to be agile and respond when things don't play out exactly how you'd like them. So we're going to talk through Mick Coy's paddock. This is an 86 hectare paddock that's had barley in 2018, wheat in 2019 and wheat in 2020, which is a pretty standard crop rotation for this part of the world. This is in out towards Merredin in WA, and where the mean 10-year in-season rainfall is only 266 millimetres. So the treatment approaches were similar in the 3 years, looking at phosphorus and nitrogen, plus or minus nitrogen. And what we're going to look through today is the 2020 trial. So as I said before, the mid part of the process is capturing the application data. So this is how we laid the trial out. On the left-hand side, we've got the phosphorus fertilizer application, and we've got a really narrow nil-nil strip that we fought really hard to get, and then we've got 30, 60 and 100 kilograms per hectare of phosphorus there, and then the nitrogen fertilizer is in yellow, and this is plus or minus 20 units. The second part of the data analysis phase is the mid-season report. We found that including the NDVI analysis in the middle of the season is important in maintaining the engagement with the trial. The first map shows the raw NDVI data laid out in the 10-metre resolution. This was collected on the 21st of August 2020 from Sentinel. And this is the intercept map of the NDVI data, which basically is how we would expect the which is the anticipated NDVI response if there was no fertiliser applied to the paddock. And this is indicative of the spatial variability within the paddock. And as I said, the mid-season report's a really good way of maintaining engagement with the trial. Then the last phase is about collecting and processing the yield and developing the harvest report. So the following maps really step through the analysis that we do and form the structure of the harvest report that goes to the agronomist and the farmer. So on the left-hand side here, we've got the adjusted wheat yield, which has also been in terms of kilograms per hectare, which has been interpolated to 10 by 10 metre plots. And on the right-hand side, we have the intercept map, which is the estimated wheat yield, assuming no fertiliser is applied. And you can see the VRT zones from mixed place are laid out over the top in black. And what's interesting is you can see areas that are low in the red and areas that are high in the green. And these line up quite nicely with the VRT zones. And again, on the left, we've got the adjusted yield. And this is in kilograms per hectare, where the red is low. You're looking at 500 kilos to a tonne per hectare, and then up to the green areas, the dark green is up to 3 tonnes per hectare. And on the right-hand side, this is the response in kilograms of yield to phosphorus applied. So you can see there's some quite responsive areas to phosphorus and an area here that's less so responsive. And then when we look at the response to nitrogen, it's a slightly different story. So we've got something going on down at the bottom of the paddock here, and then we've got some responsive areas in the dark green and some less responsive bits through the orange and yellow. We can also estimate what the yield would be if it was applied at the whole paddock scale. And this is based on the relationship between the response to treatment in terms of kilograms of yield per kilogram of fertiliser and the intercept, which accounts for the spatial variability. And when we incorporate the agribusiness data, for example, the cost of production in terms of establishment costs, fertiliser costs, and the price you receive for grain, this can become a really powerful tool. So the map on the left, map A, shows the predicted yield if no fertiliser was applied, and this should line up with the intercept map that I showed you before. And on the right-hand side, we can predict across the paddock the gross margin from minus $400 per tonne in these little red bits here, up to $600 a tonne in the dark, per hectare in the dark green. And again, this work was done in 2020, so these are the prices that we used, which we absolutely recognise may not necessarily be relevant at the moment. And so that was for the nil-nil treatment. When we move into the 30 kilograms of phosphorus, we can see there's a slightly different story. You can still see the same kind of patterns playing out, and the gross margin is starting to change. And again, when we go to 60, you're really highlighting the negative areas, but also the positive areas are becoming stronger. And finally, for the 100 kilograms of phosphorus without nitrogen, again, really nice dark green areas down the bottom. And then we're getting the gross margin playing out where this part of the paddock, there's really no point in applying, and maybe through here. And then this is no phosphorus with nitrogen applied. So you're seeing a lot more green happening, but there are some of the red areas. And then when you include 30 kilograms of phosphorus, it becomes a bit of a stronger response, and again to 60, and then again to 100. So really powerful tool for helping support decision making for fertilizer application. So the last step in the process is discussing the results and reviewing and repeating. This phase of the process is the most important, and it's quite often what Mick was saying in his video is this is the part that's quite often missed out. So the best outcomes in the project for us were achieved where the results were discussed as a team. This isn't always possible, but we learnt a huge amount from talking with Mick and also talking with Luke and his team. And at Mick's place, we built our knowledge of the paddock together. We had 3 seasons that played out quite differently, which increased the agronomy knowledge, and walking the paddock together grounded the analysts and provided context for the analysis that we were doing. And feedback from Mick and Luke really improved our analysis and the reporting structures. So you can see this was the initial format for the harvest report, which then progressed into this sort of phase, and then bringing in the gross margin analysis. Part of reviewing the results of the trial is thinking about risk and return on investment. So we've done analysis of the yield and gross margin for each of the treatments and for the 3 years of trials at Mick's place. And this was done by Luke Dawson. And the key take-home message is that for each of the seasons, there are low and high risk options that can be deployed depending on attitudes to risk. So you can see here we've got each of the treatments laid out and each of the years, so 2018, 2019 and 2020, and then whether there's urea added, whether there's the rate of phosphorus that's added, and then each of these are the zone maps that line up with the VRT mapping. And we've got an average yield for that zone, and we can calculate an average gross margin based on the numbers that we showed earlier. And you can see for each of the treatments, there's a the blue shows the highest yield or the selected yield and what the gross margin is for this. So Mick was quite cautious with his fertilizer application, particularly for this paddock, because the likelihood of a soft finish in this area is a lot lower. So the likelihood of being able to achieve the predicted yields is less. Also continuing his, so the other thing that I wanted to show is part of the analysis shows that if he'd continued to use the strategy before working with the project, we're looking at a return on investment of around $650 per hectare. When he chose the lower risk option, that still gave an increased outcome, and he made this change, his return on investment was closer to $900 per hectare. And if you'd taken the high risk option, you're looking at $1,500 per hectare if you can achieve it. And that's a really powerful analysis. So these are the kinds of decisions that we're able to support farmers and agronomists to make through this OFE process and analytics. So what I want to play for you now is the video walkthrough from the NGIS portal that's been developed. This really removes the need for bespoke analysis and employment of a statistician and data analyst. We're not trying to put ourselves out of a job, but we're trying to make this capability available to more people. The following 3 videos walk through the system that's been generated as part of our collaboration. So this one is the trial design component. So the OFE dashboard was designed to be a targeted end-to-end solution specifically for the on-farm experimentation process. In particular, the platform provides capability for the full trial life cycle, starting with the initial designs of trials through to in-season monitoring of trial results and end-of-season analysis. The initial design of the trial includes specification of the trial location and season extending into the treatments used for the respective trial strips down to the product and rate of application. The platform has been designed to accommodate a large number of trials based on the scalable cloud infrastructure. So you can see the different product types, you can increase the rates, you can select what colour you want to assign. And then you can add the treatments in. And then you can allocate to the strips according to how you'd like to lay out your trial. That's the end of that one. So the heart of the OFE platform is the integration of the geographically weighted regression process to incorporate the underlying variability of the trial location and strips into the process of trial results to provide an accurate representation of the results with different treatments. Along with the automation of the GWR, the platform integrates a mountain of satellite imagery throughout the season and also enables comparative analysis of not only strips and treatments, but also the ability to carve out results and responses from a layer of farm management units. The platform provides extensive analytics regarding the different treatments extending from in-season NDVI to predicted yield and gross margin calculations, incorporating the geographically weighted regression, intercept and response output maps. The advanced analysis capability, including gross margin calculation with the ability to apply a custom trial yield rate, cost, and price parameters. So here it's just demonstrating the ability to look at the mid-season geographically weighted regression for NDVI and also the yield, and to be able to compare those in one place in time and space, I think is quite useful. All right. Let's keep going. Oh, we need to go to the next slide, sorry. Farm management units. The farm management units capability really showcases the scalability and performance of the OFE platform. The use of farm management units provides an additional layer of analysis that can incorporate existing productivity zones, soil profiles, or other spatial boundaries to further examine the trial results. What you can see here on the video is the ability to draw or upload from farm management units and to be able to carve up the OFE analysis. One of the key things to note is that the cloud architecture of the platform facilitates the dynamic integration of farm management units with the ability to then view analysis results in the platform without extensive background processing. The scalability and performance of the platform was a key focus to provide an approach that would extend to a large number of trials across different geographies. So you can see drawing the management zones. Then you've got the ability to look at the averages for each of the treatments. Okay. Oops, not too far. So what have we learned? The OFE process helped to measure and better understand the results of an experiment. The speed of interpretation and delivery of results is increased by early, before implementation discussions about trial design with the growers and agronomists. Collection of paddock history and data layers is really, really useful, because the more we know about what's happened in the past, the more we can understand what's going on in the paddock in that particular season. It's really important to keep frequent contact with the grower and the agronomist in season to maintain interest in the trial, and to make sure that we can get the data at the end of the project, at the end of the trial. The discussion of results together leads to a deeper interpretation and co-learnings. One of the key things that we did as a group was to use the R-Shiny to visualize our data for feedback and run a co-innovation process with growers and agronomists. And this provided a more nuanced understanding of the spatial variable response to treatments, but it also gave us the opportunity to provide a lot of feedback to NGIS about how to design their platform. The paddock scale predictions of treatment response and gross margins combine to be a powerful tool to support management decisions and incorporate risk. So what's next? The project final report is available on the Food Agility website, and you can click on this QR code to go straight to it, or you can do a search for On Farm Experimentation for Food Agility projects. We've got a case study booklet that's coming soon that complements the final report and is really designed for growers to understand what it means for them in doing on-farm experiments, and how they can use the analysis to do more with their trials. And from a next steps point of view, we've got a new project under development with Food Agility, Curtin, DPIRD and NGIS, where we'll continue to build the functionality of the on-farm experimentation tool. We'll develop statistically robust approaches to scaling up results from strip trials to farm management units and beyond. We also want to consider other treatment analysis of other treatments beyond just fertilizer. And there's a really key part in upskilling the agronomy sector in deployment of the OFE process, paddock scale analysis and the OFE tool. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you for your attention, and thanks Dave again for the opportunity to talk.
Thanks, Julia. And just a reminder to everyone, if you do have questions, please post them on the Q&A tab. We've got a little bit of time to talk a bit more about what we've just heard. And Julia, I've got a few questions already. So behind the on-farm experimentation analytics, you know, there's a really robust engine, and there's a lot of science, a lot of research that went behind that. How much stock did you find producers put into the credentials of the science that went behind it? Like, did that play a big role, knowing it was good, solid research, or were they really after the tool, the front door?
I think they're really after the answer, but the thing that I will say is the agronomists really valued it. If they're making recommendations to the farmers about what to do, they want to know that this is underpinned by statistically rigorous information. And you know, we've had a long history in WA and nationally around doing small plot trials, particularly for fertilizer treatments. And they're, you know, it's always been ANOVA, 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 ANOVA. That's the way to go. And then, so helping them get their head around how scaling up to this paddock scale and ANOVA is no longer suitable is really important. And I think the conversations that we had around the kitchen table at the farmers' houses with the agronomists was really, really powerful in helping us to understand what the growers want to know. And really, it's that that risk and return on investment page. That's all they're interested in. Which treatment do I need to take? And what's my risk profile on that? Am I likely to achieve that outcome? But the agronomists really want to be able to make recommendations and be supported in those decisions. That's better than, you know, looking down a strip and going, oh, that one looks better than that one. Or you know, maybe looking at the header as they're going over that section, and getting a bit more information than just that.
So I'll channel my inner Emma Leonard now. I don't think Emma's in the audience today, but I'm sure she'd like to ask a question. I can hear her screaming and yelling already. So you mentioned sitting at the table with the agronomists in train involved. You know, thinking ahead, because you're looking to scale this project up and out. So, you know, 2 to 5 producers to 10 becomes 10s become 100s. How important did you find that trusted intermediary was in that relationship and keeping the producers engaged?
Absolutely. So, you know, we really need the 3 points of the triangle, and I think I've been banging on about this for about as long as Emma Leonard has. That trust in that network is really important. So what is the grower getting out of this? What is the agronomist getting out of this? What are the researchers getting out of this? And what do we all bring to the table? And what do we get when we each are going in there for everyone to win from that relationship? And so the learnings that we had, where everybody was leaning in, everybody was behind the project, was really fantastic. And the conversations we had with the growers, you know, we really got to see at the end of the day, it's the dollars that are the bottom line for them. And for the agronomists, it's helping them to understand what the maps mean and how to communicate what that is, because that's taken a long time to get that right. And I still remember sitting at Mick's house and the penny dropping on Luke's face when he goes, oh, and I was like, right, we've got it now. And then building on, that's how we communicate this going forward. It's still really complicated, and I still have to check all of my notes to make sure that I've got it right, because I don't live and breathe this every day. This is the team effort. But it's absolutely, in order to get the best outcomes, that's where you go. But, you know, we've done 50 something trials, and we've had everything from, here's a trial we did, can you analyze it, to mixed place and everything in between. And so it's never going to be perfect all the time. And in, you know, hindsight, there's a whole bunch of things that you can do better, but we continue to build that story. And what I will say is our group and the statistics for the Australian Grains Industry Group have really been developing some I'd say rules of thumb that are based on a whole bunch of models and theoretical frameworks for how to get the best out of these paddock scale trials from a design point of view, and also pushing ahead on the analysis point of view.
Look, thank you. And actually, following on that last point, James from Armidale, good to see you, James.
Hi, James.
Nice and cold up there. I hear it feels like zero. James asks, are strict trials needed in each paddock to generate recommendations, or can the results from one paddock be extrapolated?
That's a really great question, and we're really keen to investigate that in the next phase. And so having the management zones that Mick had that are assigned to the 4 soil types that he had on his farm, he was comfortable taking the results from that paddock and scaling it to his whole farm. I'm not quite as comfortable with that, but I guess that's better than, you know, than best guess. Well, and that's fine, but we're really keen to continue to develop that capability, and ultimately that's where we want to be able to get to.
No, excellent. And a follow-up question from Sarita. Can you give us a bit of an insight into the data layers that sit behind the development of that intercept and base yield that you put up?
Well, so for those, it's the yield, and it's how the yield points are in space. So it's all the information that you get off the header, and then we do. So the strips are, or the whole paddocks broken down into 10 by 10 metre squares, and we do a local linear regression that compares each square with all of the squares around it. So when we're doing fertiliser trials, using a linear regression is fine when you're on the yield curve that's at this point, but when you start getting to that quadratic bend, then you need a different analytics approach, which we've been doing a little bit of work on. But for most trials, and because a lot of the new varieties really can go a long way on that curve, this approach works for fertiliser. The ability to use the geographically weighted regression approach for other types of treatments where we've got categorical treatments rather than a dose dependent or rate treatment is another area that we'd like to expand on. And there's a whole bunch of other things that we need to do from a statistics point of view there.
Yeah, you had on Farmer's question nicely.
Yeah, well, and I was just going to follow on with Sarita's question. In some of the other projects we've been working in, Sarita, we've been able to bring in soil mapping data. The NDVI data also is really valuable. Where you've got the VRT maps, that's awesome. And then one of the things that we've been talking about is including the soil testing and tissue testing and how that can support the recommendations going forward. So that's all in the watch this space, but that's what we're working with at the moment.
And I think that feeds on the questions from Ace here about you've got data through a yield monitor or an NDVI, so that's really very dense data, spatially very dense. And there's a question about, can it be applied in pasture legume trials too? So I'm assuming that Ace is really getting at this data.
Yeah.
What limitations or any indications about, what's the lower limit?
That's a really good question.
Yes.
And maybe I need to talk to the pasture project that we've got in food agility, Dave. I don't know, probably. I need to think about that some more.
That's okay.
And
good
yeah,
question, Ace. I have to
it is.
it.
Yeah.
So I guess a follow-up from Hamid, and I guess it's interesting using the technology, the platform outside of Australia. So I'm assuming this is referring to the NGIS platform. It's got your engine behind it. Have you got any sense? Is this a purely domestic play at the moment, or regional in WA, or is there a plan to?
So my understanding, so the NGIS tool has been built for business to business, so it's more likely to be used by an agronomy group or something like that than necessarily for farmers. And my understanding is that that NGIS are intending for this to be outside of Australia as well as in Australia. I imagine that it will work outside because it's about understanding the relationship between the yield and space. And while space will differ depending on where you are, and season will differ depending on where you are, those relationships, as long as we're talking, like the fertilizer treatment where you've got that relationship between yield and the spatial element, I think it should work. But, there's always more research to be done.
Absolutely. Research with animals and scientists. So towards the end of your talk, you made a reference to the next steps, and you specifically mentioned upskilling the agronomy sector, I guess in relation to the OFA tools, the process, and even the development, the delivery system. What's the nature of the challenge? How big is this upskilling challenge?
I don't think the challenge is particularly difficult. I think it's an opportunity to slot it into what is existing. So when I was talking with DPIRD, they're really keen on this particular component. And so working with the DPIRD researchers in the first instance, but also any of the agronomy sector that are keen to be involved. And so some of this is about teaching them how they can use the process as well as the back-end analytics. And then with the view that when that becomes part of the norm and it goes hand in hand, so if you've got a small plot trial and a paddock scale trial, and then you can use both of those results to actually give a holistic response to the treatments, and I think that's really powerful. So in order for this to be adopted by industry, we have to, well, we've been encouraged to work with the people that are most likely to use this, and I'm really looking forward to that part.
Cool. And we've got a post from Sarita that mentioned that in answer to ACE's questions.
Oh yeah, she'll know this.
Investigating the applicability of geographic weighted regression method across pasture and cropping years in a paddock using yield and satellite NDVI. So fabulous. Sarita, you're on my hit list for maybe a future seminar on this. There's so many questions. So Julia, so I guess last question from me, and it's been a long project, right? There's been a lot of elbow grease put into the engagement, development of the team and of the tools, and congratulations to the NGIS team for the tool. What surprised you most about the project?
Oh, gee, what surprised me the most? I think I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of industry buy-in that we had at the beginning of the project, and particularly when the team were really finding their feet and trying to work out how to match up this capability with the problem. And then when I came into the team and I could translate from agronomists to the researchers and maybe to the farmers a little bit, that really helped. But I think the thing that's been so exciting about this project is how much the industry partners wanted this work, and how supportive and how much they leaned in and did the heavy lifting with the elbow grease, Dave, because there's absolutely no way that we would have been able to achieve what we had without all of the hard work particularly from Luke and Brad and from Nathan and his team, but also the grower group. So working with Dave Minke and working with a number of the Jeremy Lemon, Bindi Isbista, we've just had, and also the GGA. So I think while we haven't got everything perfect and pretty and shiny, we've taken a really big step forward. And the thing that I'm most excited about, I don't know if that counts as surprised, is what comes next and what we're able to build on this foundation.
Oh, excellent. Oh, it's an exciting project, and looking forward to the next steps. So thank you, Julia, for your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for being part of the seminar. Now, feel free to reach out to Julia direct if you'd like to hear more or learn more about the project. And don't forget, we're going to be releasing a recorded version of the seminar in the coming days. Keep your eyes open for our next seminar. That'll come around in mid-August, so the details will follow in the next couple of weeks. Also, a flag ahead to October 25-26. Once again, we're going to be having our online research symposium. And yes, we'll have that jingle, so keep your eyes open for the request for your 30-second smartphone recording. Details will follow. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next month's research seminar.